Hi, this is Jim Musser with Upstream Ministries, and this is episode 58 on Views from Downstream. And we're spending some time talking about assumptions that both pastors, church leaders, as well as parents make. And when we're talking about raising kids spiritually. And I want to talk this week a little bit about assumptions in terms of kids' faith. And I really want to talk to parents today and then talk to pastors on Wednesday about this idea that many parents have of the need for their child to get saved, accept Jesus. And there's a big push, often in either literally or in parents' minds, that this needs to happen sooner than later. And let me just frame this with my own experience dealing with college students. There were countless times that I talked with college students, particularly freshmen, sophomores, even sometimes juniors, who were involved in the ministry I directed, would tell me, after being involved a while, that they thought that they were Christian and that they had become a Christian back when they were 6 years old, 8 years old, 10 years old, 12 years old. And they were beginning to rethink that because they realized that when they, quote unquote, accepted Jesus and perhaps were baptized, that they really didn't understand the implications of that. They didn't understand what it meant to truly follow Jesus. And so I presided over a number of confessions of faith of these students who supposedly had done that back in the day, and rebaptized them because they felt like they actually knew what they were doing. And my point is that it's not necessarily wrong, and I'm not saying that these kids, and when they were younger, weren't truly Christian. It's quite possible they were, but they didn't really understand that. They weren't making an informed decision. They were making it with their childish minds, in a sense. And God's not going to hold that against them, but I'm wondering why we feel the need to get kids into a relationship with Jesus, get them baptized so early. What do we think is going to happen? And I think sometimes we tend to think that if they don't do that and they suddenly die, what will happen? Will they go to hell? Because that seems to be the driving thing. We really want to get our kids saved. And yet it really reveals an attitude toward God, a conception of God that is wholly inaccurate. And that is that God is not merciful, that God is demanding and he's rigid. And so, by golly, that kid better get saved, make a confession of faith, or they're going to go to hell. Now, I just don't see God that way. I don't think the scriptures reveal God that way. And so I don't see the need to pressure kids either subtly or directly that they need to make a decision to follow Jesus. Because there's no rush in that, because God's mercy over childish minds or childlike minds, they are not going to be held account in the same way as adults are. And so we shouldn't assume that. And the benefit of seeing God in this way is then when young people truly do commit their lives to Jesus, when they're at the point of responsibility for their actions, then it's going to be real. And again, I've known many young people and seen that they make confessions at camps or in front of the church. They're baptized, and then years later, they are not walking with God at all. And I would say, I mentioned this before, this 50 to 80% of young people after they graduate from high school leave the faith. I am guessing that a lot of those kids made confessions and were baptized. And so I just want to encourage you as parents, don't feel the need to have your child make a confession of faith or be baptized, particularly when they're very young, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years old. In my mind, and I know this may stir up some disagreement, but I just think they're too young to make those decisions, that God's mercy carries them in that time period. And we need to teach them about God, teach them about Jesus, teach them how to follow him, what it looks like. But we don't need to force upon them a confession that truly they're not mature enough to make. And I just want you to think about that, because it's very easy to, and I've seen many Facebook posts, to rejoice over that child who's 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years old becoming a Christian. But the reality is, and my reality was, that many of those kids later on acknowledged they had no clue what they were doing. Now, I'm not saying every young adult has that story, but many do. And it just gives me pause to think that we need to really press them, encourage them to make a confession when they're not really mentally, emotionally ready to do so and follow through on it. So I'll leave it there and let you think about that. Feel free to comment about that. And we'll see you on Wednesday.